As the world knows, the United States, since our election on November 8th, has been moving ahead really brilliantly.
It is Monday, November 13th. The Fox News alert while you were sleeping. President Trump arriving at the ASEAN summit to meet with world leaders. We are live with what to expect as he wraps up his 2-week tour overseas.
And NFL head Roger Goodell's contract demands almost as offensive as the anthem protesters. A private plane for life? That's not all. Wait until you hear this one.
And did Amazon just ruin Christmas?
At Amazon, we've got toys and games by the sackload this Christmas, with free delivery on millions of eligible items.
Oh, the ad that has parents fired up this morning. Fox and Friends First continues right now.
Song gets you going when you hear it on the radio. Good morning. You're watching Fox and Friends First on this Monday morning. I'm Jillian Mealy.
Happy Monday. I'm Rob Schmidt. Thanks for starting your day with us. It is 5 a.m. here on the East Coast. Right to our top story. Breaking overnight, President Trump just meeting with Indian Prime Minister Modi.
It's the latest in his day of meetings at the ASEAN summit, which included a controversial sit-down with Philippine leader Rodrigo Duterte.
Kevin Cork is traveling with the president. He joins us live from Manila in the Philippines this morning. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, guys. Always good to talk to you. You're right. As the president winds down this 13-day, 5-country nation tour of the beautiful continent of Asia, he is making it clear that he believes that his is an era of renewal and respect in the region.
This has been a very fruitful trip for us, and also, in all fairness, for a lot of other nations. There's red carpet like nobody, I think, has probably ever received, and that really is a sign of respect.
A sign of respect, says Mr. Trump. That comment reflecting the warm welcome he's received here at ASEAN. Of course, that is the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, where trade and economic cooperation generally headline the gathering. But this year, as you point out there, Rob, it's the many breakouts, most notably the ones with Presidents Trump and Duterte that are garnering a great deal of attention. The men, as you can imagine, seem fairly comfortable together. They discussed a variety of issues, including security and the fight against ISIS, where they touched on human rights just a bit. The president said it was part of just what he calls an incredibly pivotal visit to the region.
We'll be making a statement when we get back from the White House. We've made some very big steps with respect to trade, far bigger than anything you know. In addition to about $300 billion in sales to various companies, including China.
Lastly, the family photo this year, folks, well, it's one that'll have tongues a-wagging. Now, usually the leaders, sort of stand there and they cross their arms and they hold hands, a sign of unity on an international stage. But, guys, look, it only works if you stand really close together. The leaders having a little fun with the fact that didn't quite go as well as planned. Now, you mentioned the Modi bilateral tonight. It's a dinner with the Prime Minister of Australia. We'll keep you posted on all the details, and we promise we'll be nice and close together. Back to you guys.
Kevin, thank you so much. All right, the White House firing back against claims that the president is being played by Vladimir Putin. This is former CIA Director John Brennan expressed his worries about President Trump's recent conversations with Russia's president.
I think Mr. Putin is very clever in terms of playing to Mr. Trump's interest in being flattered. I think Mr. Trump is, for whatever reason, either intimidated by Mr. Putin, afraid of what he could do.
Minutes later, White House Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin hitting back at those comments.
Well, in all due respect to your previous guests, I think that those were the most ridiculous statements. President Trump is not getting played by anybody.
All right, Mr. Trump tweeting over the weekend, when will all the haters and fools out there realize that having a good relationship with Russia is a good thing, not a bad thing? They're always playing politics. Bad for our country. I want to solve North Korea, Syria, Ukraine, terrorism, and Russia can greatly help.
Now to another Fox News alert. At least 330 people are dead after a monster earthquake rocks the Iran-Iraq border. Those numbers rising by the minute this morning after the 7.3 magnitude quake hit just north of Baghdad. Nearly 4,000 people in both countries are hurt, many running for their lives as buildings swayed. Video from a Kurdish TV news station shows a guest shaking in his seat during an interview before rushing off the set. Look at that. The quake was felt as far out as the western Mediterranean coast. About 50 aftershocks rattling the region in the hours following the quake. We'll keep you posted. A stabbing spree at the nation's largest shopping mall just feet from where kids were visiting with Santa. Police say a botched robbery at a Macy's dressing room inside Mall of America turned into a stabbing spree when the suspect was confronted by other shoppers. 2 people were stabbed but will be okay. Customers holding the man down until police arrested him. This all unfolding next door from where dozens of children were getting photos taken with Santa Claus.
All right, the final witness in the Kate Steinle murder trial expected to take the stand today. Illegal immigrant Juan Francisco Lopez Sanchez, who was already deported 5 times, admits to shooting Kate Steinle, but claims that the gun went off accidentally. The 32-year-old was killed in 2015 while walking on a pier in San Francisco with her father. Her death inspired Kate's Law, which cracks down on illegal immigrant criminals, but that law is still working its way through Congress. Closing arguments in the trial are expected next week. Just 1 week after a gunman opened fire, killing 26 people during a worship service in Texas, that same congregation meeting for church once again.
We have the freedom to choose, and rather than choose darkness, as the one young man did that day, I say we choose life. And by choosing life, amen.
It was a much larger service than normal. Hundreds of people showing up at this tent service for First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, Texas. The church building turned into a memorial you see here and opened to the public. It is beautiful. Each victim represented by an empty white chair and a single rose. The building is expected to eventually be demolished.
Wow. A mother hailed a hero for saving her children from a burning apartment building. Texas firefighters saying a child playing with a lighter started the fire on the complex's 2nd floor. 50 families now without a home. 4 people being treated for minor injuries.
All right, just hours from now, the NFL will negotiate the alleged $50 million contract extension of Commissioner Roger Goodell.
But at least one owner says not so fast after Goodell's handling of the national anthem protests. Caroline Shively joins us now from Washington, D.C. with the latest. Good morning.
Good morning, guys. If the NFL approves it, this would be one heck of a raise for Roger Goodell. The contract would reportedly raise his salary from $30 million to $49.5 million a year. And that's not all. It would also provide him private jet use for life and lifetime health insurance for his family. That's according to ESPN. All 32 NFL owners voted in May to extend Goodell's contract and authorized the compensation committee to negotiate on their behalf. But it's not a done deal. In fact, Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones is threatening to sue the NFL if they okay Goodell's contract without further approval from owners. The negotiations come while Goodell is wrestling with how to handle some players kneeling during the national anthem, protesting police brutality and racial inequality. Last month, Goodell said that we want our players to stand, but stopped short of imposing a rule requiring it. Only a handful of players protested before yesterday's early games as the league celebrated Veterans Day weekend. Those kneeling included 49ers Eric Reed, one of the first players to join the movement last year, and wide receiver Marquise Goodwin. Giants defensive end Olivier Vernon also knelt during the anthem yesterday. Some veterans aren't too happy about it.
Wish everybody would stand up for the flag because that's what USA it's all about.
Veterans in Illinois had their own reaction to players kneeling yesterday, with Bears and Packers fans burning jerseys and sending the charred remains to the owners. Robin Jillian, back to you.
Definitely making a statement.
Certainly is. Caroline, thank you so much. All right, a sweet treat on its way to astronauts aboard the International Space Station.
3, 2, 1. And we have ignition.
The unmanned Antares rocket successfully blasting off from Wallops Island in Virginia. On board 80 different ice cream treats, a full Thanksgiving dinner, and 7,000 pounds of supplies.
Ooh. I'm going to say, that can't just be candy in there, right? Okay.
It is 10 minutes after the hour. Critics and the mainstream media going all out to keep the Russia narrative alive.
Trump's policy seems to be trust. Hey, listen, Putin said that they didn't do it, so they didn't do it.
Is the media being irresponsible or just telling it like it is? We debate it next.
And country music superstar Carrie Underwood rushed to the hospital after falling outside of her Nashville home. Well, we just learned about her condition overnight.
And the big scandal in the United Kingdom this morning, Prince Harry breaking military rules. Can you tell what he did wrong?
It's running out of blood. That kind of love just ain't for us. We crave a different kind of buzz. Let me be your
All right, President Trump coming face-to-face with Vladimir Putin in Asia as the mainstream media continues to really push the Russia collusion theory.
I think he's giving Putin a pass, and I think it demonstrates to Mr. Putin that Donald Trump can be played.
He believes him, while he does not believe the intelligence agencies of the United States of America.
Donald Trump's policy seems to be trust. Hey, listen, Putin said that they didn't do it, so they didn't do it.
All right, so were the president's remarks taken out of context? Here to debate that is contributor for The Hill and the Washington Examiner, Jen Kearns, along with president of Solidarity Strategies and former Bernie Sanders surrogate Chuck Rocha. Guys, thanks so much for coming on this morning. Jen, I want to start with you now. You heard the initial comment from the president. You really believe that this was taken out of context, that he didn't say that he doesn't think Russia meddled. He says that he believes that Vladimir Putin doesn't think that they meddled. Explain to me what that means. Clarify that for us.
Well, you know, it's interesting to watch the mainstream media as well as the left attack the president when he's traveling on foreign soil. We used to have this gentleman's agreement in America where you didn't critique the president, whether he was a Republican or a Democrat, while they were on foreign soil. So situations like this are really mind-blowing, that you have a comment by the leader of the free world that can be taken out of context and sent halfway around the world. In this case, the president felt the need to come back and clarify his remarks. Look, I don't think he's taking it easy on Vladimir Putin. I think he's doing what he needs to do, which is work with these world leaders and continue to move forward on foreign policy.
And Jen, let me read that, and then Chuck, I'm going to get your reaction. This is the actual quote of what the president said, which he says was taken out of context. Here it is. He just, every time he sees me, he says, I didn't do that. And I really believe that when he tells me that, he means it. So that's it right there. Chuck, what do you say to this? Give me your response.
Well, I think our national security advisors have told us exactly what's went on, and that Russia meddled in our elections. Now, Donald Trump comes out and says stuff all the time. That's how Donald Trump got elected. Then he has to come back and walk it back because he's like, I can't really say it that way. Now, what you're going to see in the media, just like, let me give you a word called Benghazi. We talked about that a little bit on this network. When networks find something that they can use, that we're out there talking about, it helps them get ratings, and that's why the other press is out there doing it. Yeah. And I think the elections last Tuesday show that the American people want the answers.
Yeah, okay, well, I think that's fair. I mean, the networks are going to cover it if it sells, and Russia sells to the left, to the people that don't like the president. It is a good sale. What do you say to that, Jen?
Well, look, I think it's ironic to see John Brennan talking about harming the intelligence community. Let's remember it was James Brennan who infused the Fusion GPS document, the Trump dossier, into the intelligence community during an election year. This turned out to be a paid political hit piece funded by Hillary Clinton and the DNC. So John Brennan ought to be very careful when talking about who has harmed the intelligence community. I can think of nothing worse than putting in a disinformation piece of information that may have been funded by Russia in part into the system. I mean, this is really, really maddening, really crazy stuff.
Chuck, just to the general, the status of this investigation, you know, there has been some ties to it, but we're not really getting a huge smoking gun at this point. Do you think it's still coming, or do you think that when you investigate an entire administration, there's always going to be some kind of ties to anywhere, right? I mean, there's ties from the Clintons to Russia.
Let me give you the Democratic view from the far left, which is where I reside. I don't care who did what. Let's get to the bottom of it. Whether it was Hillary Clinton, whether it was Donald Trump, whether it was the Russians, whether it was whoever it was, let's get the facts and let's get it over with. The American people are sick of this. They want to know if they was guilty or not guilty, and let's move on because we got a lot of work to do behind me here in Washington, D.C., trying to get this country moving.
Chuck, you are very level-headed as always. We do appreciate it. Jen, you as well. Wonderful conversation this morning on a very interesting topic. Guys, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Jillian.
Former Vice President Joe Biden shying away from a 2020 presidential run. In an interview set to be released on Snapchat's Good Luck America tomorrow, Biden says, quote, "I've done it a long time and I'm just not sure it's the appropriate thing for me to do." However, according to the preview obtained by the Associated Press, Biden goes on to suggest that if no one steps up, he'd be open to giving it a try. We'll see. One of those Democrats who could step up is Clinton crony and outgoing Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe. Speculation of a 2020 run growing after Democrats in the state had a successful election last Tuesday. McAuliffe not ruling it out.
Will we see McAuliffe in 2020 on the list of possible Democratic candidates for president? Yes or no?
Reverend, I'm going to finish this job strong, and let's talk after I get out of here.
McAuliffe used his executive power last year to restore voting rights to more than 200,000 convicted felons ahead of the 2016 election.
All right, 19 minutes after the hour, Senator John Cornyn firing back at Chuck Schumer for calling President Trump's Asia trip a flop. And social media fired up over this. Carly Shimkus here next with some outrage online.
Uh-oh.
Good morning.
To get that training, right, we need actual aircraft in the air flying against us. With this system, we don't. What we could do now is let you have a chance to fly the airplane. Pull some G's.
And American companies answering the call to help our military grow stronger, faster. Rob's climbing into the cockpit ahead. Oh, boy. Senator John Cornyn coming to President Trump's defense, firing back at Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, who called his trip to Asia a flop.
Carly Shimkus is here. Chuck Schumer talking trash about the president?
That's right.
Well, I never.
Oh, my gosh. Is the world going to stop? Well, the president is in the Philippines right now on his last leg of his trip to Asia. And he's had some good news to report on Twitter, saying China is upping sanctions against North Korea. But New York Senator Chuck Schumer is calling the trip a failure. He took to Twitter saying this: Trump Asia trip a flop. POTUS acts like a lapdog to Xi in China, but talks tough to our friends in Southeast Asia. Presidency by misadventure. Well, Texas Senator John Cornyn had this to say in response. So much for Senator Arthur Vandenberg's admonition that we must stop partisan politics at the water's edge. Now, what he's saying there is that it's never a good idea to criticize an acting president while on a diplomatic mission overseas. A lot of people are weighing in on this back and forth on Twitter. Rick says, and he's referring to Senator Schumer here, he says, I think you're so wrong. His reestablishment of alliances and firm stance for the U.S. is noteworthy. Going back to what John Cornyn said, though, it is true, very important to present a united front, especially when dealing with other countries, right?
Yeah, well, it used to be.
Carly, do you think that Santa Claus is a little fed up with Amazon right now?
Yeah, that's the big question of the day. So parents are very angry with Amazon after they released an ad in the UK that shows a father hiding presents instead of Santa Claus. Take a look at this.
At Amazon, we've got toys and games by the sackload this Christmas, with free delivery on millions of eligible items.
Well, everybody knows that's Santa's job, so Amazon is just clearly wrong. Sophie on Twitter says, thanks, Amazon, for your advertisement. My 3-year-old is asking why this man is hiding the presents instead of Santa Claus.
And I'm sure Santa's very angry, too.
Yes, I know. So I hear he's very forgiving. So if Jeff Bezos asks nicely, he might still remain on the nice list,
Yeah,
right?
that's not a very good move. And what happened to Carrie Underwood?
All right, well, you know, she brought the house down during the Country Music Awards, but she appears to have had some trouble when she got back home. Well, listen, she fell and she broke her wrist. She was rushed to the hospital, but she says that she is okay. In this tweet to fans, she says, "Thank you so much for all the well wishes, everybody. I'll be all right. I might just take some time. Glad I've got the best hubby in the world to take care of me." Got a great husband. Got a whole lot of fans that are concerned about her too.
I fall all the time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Mike Fisher, who is a former hockey player. I think he just retired.
Preds.
Yeah.
Okay. Not another country star?
Not another country star, yeah.
Okay.
But still, Nashville favorite.
Thanks, there you go.
Thanks a lot.
All right. 26 minutes after the hour, lawmakers on Capitol Hill preparing to battle it out over tax reform. Can Congress actually get something done this year and put some money back in your pocket? We're live with the next step that could be critical to the landmark legislation.
And despite falling attendance and boycotts, NFL players still protest the national anthem even on Veterans Day weekend. Will the NFL stand up and make a real change? Our next guest is a veteran who says, don't hold your breath. Welcome back and good morning. While President Trump finishes his Asia tour, Congress is full steam ahead on passing tax reform to put more money in your pocket.
They're going to try, but the question everyone's asking, can they get this done by the end of the year? Griff Jenkins in D.C. this morning with what's happening today to push it forward. Hey, Griff.
Hey, Robin, Jillian. Well, they're making progress, but a ways to go. The full House votes this week as the Senate begins markup day. And remember, a plan must pass both chambers before they can reconcile a final bill. And already both plans are meeting criticism that they actually raise taxes. But House Ways and Means Chairman Kevin Brady downplayed them, saying they're on track to get something to the president's desk.
We continue improvements at every step in the way, but I'll tell you what, our Republicans in the House know that it is time to deliver on this economy and grow these paychecks by getting rid of this current tax code. That's exactly what we're going to do.
Let's look at those plans. In the Senate plan, there are 7 brackets. 4 in the House. The Senate lets homeowners deduct mortgage interest payments up to $1 million. The House cuts half. Both slash the corporate rate to 20%, but the Senate delays it a year. And the most glaring difference, the Senate plan completely eliminates the federal deduction for state and local taxes, while that allows up to $10,000 for property taxes. And this last one has Republicans in high tax states like New York, New Jersey, and California very worried, and Democrats like Chuck Schumer blasting it.
If state and local is in this bill, it's a dagger to the heart of New York. It's a dagger to the heart of New Jersey. And those 15, have to choose their states over the rich special interests who are trying to push them around so they can get a tax break.
And as they work all this out, the president will come home, really put a lot of pressure on lawmakers to get things moving even farther forward, Rob.
All right, Griff, thanks so much. All right, it is a scandal that you may not hear much about from the mainstream media. After 3 decades as one of the top D.C. lobbying firms, the Podesta Group could be shutting down by the end of the year. The firm, which is being eyed by Robert Mueller's ever-expanding investigation, is now being pressured to close. Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton joined us earlier on what we see as a media blackout of this story.
The standard for Mueller seems to be, if you did business with the Russians and you're a Republican, you're going to be in our sights. But someone like John Podesta's evidence that similar issues with Democrats are subject of investigation.
Co-founder of the group, John Podesta, chaired Hillary Clinton's failed 2016 presidential campaign. So this is all a little incestuous, and they're looking into it. Historic show of force against North Korean aggression. The U.S. Navy carrying out a rare 3-carrier exercise in the Sea of Japan. The USS Nimitz, Ronald Reagan, and Theodore Roosevelt doing multiple drills with South Korean and Japanese warships. This is the first time the 3 U.S. carriers have exercised together in about 10 years. The drills are anticipated to end on Tuesday. An air traffic controller in big trouble for possessing a weapon of mass destruction. Paul George Dan, who worked the Charlotte Douglas International Airport, had a pipe bomb at his house. He claims he got it from his roommate, Derek Fells, who was also arrested. Fells was apparently planning to use it on a neighbor after some type of dispute. The FAA has terminated Dan's access to the airport. He is set to face a judge today on federal charges. Major stadiums across New York City are amping up their security as terror concerns are on the rise. More than a dozen NYPD officers armed with high-powered, semi-automatic commando rifles will be stationed at Madison Square Garden and Brooklyn's Barclays Center within the next few weeks. The officers undergoing a special 2-week anti-terror training course. This comes less than 2 weeks after an ISIS-inspired terrorist rammed a truck into pedestrians along the West Side Highway in Manhattan, killing 8 people. Jillian.
Outrage boiling over. At least 3 players taking a knee as the league honors America's real heroes during Veterans Day weekend. This as the league announces that there will be at least 3 players taking a knee as the league honors America's real heroes during Veterans Day weekend. This as the league announces that there will be no change to the anthem policy as more fans boycott. Here now to react is Army Reserves veteran Kathy Barnett. Thank you so much for joining us, Kathy. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Were you surprised when you saw a handful of players taking a knee on Veterans Day weekend?
No, I wasn't surprised at all. And nor am I surprised by the decision from the NFL commissioners. I've often said that the change we want to see in America is not going to come from the top down. It's going to come from the grassroots up. And we saw what the power of the grassroots in the last November when we elected Donald Trump. That was not supposed to happen. But the grassroots is a formidable group of people. And when we get sick and tired of being sick and tired, change happens.
So, in fairness, some people on the other side, I guess, would argue that and counter that by saying, but isn't that what the Colin Kaepernicks of the world are trying to do? How would you respond to that?
Well, then I will respond to that with, let's look at the facts. The fact, if the narrative is that on every street corner there's a police officer waiting to shoot a black man, because remember, hands up, don't shoot was very popular at one point. If that's the narrative, then we have to look at the facts. And in 2016, 233 blacks were fatally shot by the police. Of that, 16 were unarmed. Now, the 16, it kind of masks the fact that some of those particular fatal shootings were due to very aggressive resistance of arrest. But nonetheless, one is too many. But if the narrative is, and the reason why they're kneeling, that we're suffering from on every street corner, there's a police officer ready to shoot a black man, well, it just doesn't jive with the facts.
Right. You look at the fact that this weekend it was the fewest number of players who were kneeling in quite some time, probably all season long. Mm-hmm. Do you see this starting to dwindle down a little bit? Is that your hope at this point anyway? Where do we see this ending?
Well, we can always keep hope alive, but the reality is, I call it little crumbs of acquiescing, right? So we see the very sappy little commercials with the NFL players and the violin music softly playing in the background, and on one side of their mouth they're saying that they really respect the veterans, but on the other side of their mouth they're showing disrespect towards the very symbol of honor. I had the wonderful opportunity of meeting Johnny Joseph Jones, Triple J.
Johnny Joe Jones.
Yeah, I know. We love him, right? And to hear his story, he lost both of his legs in Afghanistan. And I remember, so many of our soldiers, they followed that flag into battle. Yep. And now we have people who dare to take a knee, it's become really political.
Before we let you go, we have about 20 seconds.
Yes.
What's your thought on the fact that Roger Goodell is reportedly requesting $50 million as a salary, a private jet for his life?
I know,
does he deserve
right?
that?
Come on, a $20 million raise. He's already making $30 million, right? But just look at the hypocrisy, because this is a man who says he does not want to impede on the NFL players' right to speak, and he's going to have these meetings, talk about inequality. Talk about inequality, and you're requesting a $20 million raise and a private jet and lifetime benefits. Mm-hmm. And what have you done for the league? Everything is falling, whether it's attendance, viewership, even sponsors. Yeah. So why do you want the $20 million? Talk about inequalities.
Kathy Barnett, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate your perspective.
Thank you for having me.
Rob? Sorry, Rob. We're going to go to Janice Dean first. We'll get to you, Rob, in a second. Janice with a look at the weather.
I would love to see Rob do the weather, actually. Can we get that happening?
Good.
That's my wish for Santa. Let's take a look at the current temperature, shall we? 44 in New York, not too bad. I mean, it got cold over the weekend across the Northeast, so we're starting to moderate a little bit. 34 in Chicago, 26 in Minneapolis, cooler across the northern tier, warm across still the Gulf Coast. Let's take a look. We do have a weak system pushing across the Northeast. Behind the system, we're seeing a little bit of snow across the Northeast, so let's zoom on in and I'll show you where we're seeing the coastal rain event. New York, you're not going to see the snow, but you can see some snow flying certainly west of the New York City area. And then our next big system is pushing into the west, bringing rain and mountain snow and very gusty winds. The area of low pressure moving into British Columbia, but the associated front is going to bring excessive amounts of rain and some mountain snow to the northern Rockies as well as the interior Northwest. All right, Jillian and Rob, back to you. What do you think, Rob? You going to do some weather with me?
You know what? If nobody's going to watch me do the weather. They want to see Janice Dean do the weather.
No.
Here's my
I'll
forecast. It's going to be colder for the next 4 months. Generally speaking.
You're very smart, Rob.
Janice, thanks so much.
All right.
39 minutes after the hour, illegal immigrants now using churches as sanctuaries to avoid arrest. But is that really what a house of God ought to be doing?
God has given government, not the church, the responsibility to enforce the law, and that's an important distinction to keep in mind.
All right, so there's a Bible lesson that these churches may want to hear. That's coming up next.
We're trying to develop the next generation of pilot training for the U.S. Air Force. One of the keys to that is virtual reality.
And American companies answering the call to help our military.